Hello, and welcome to the first lesson of Language in the Media. With this being a move to a new scheme of work, I thought it'd be worth just spending, first minute or so just going over what it entails basically. So you've got 24 marks for analysing a media text. So it'll be a website article of some sort. It will have been posted online and will have, multi-modality. It'll be a mixture of text and image or text and image and video. You get 12 marks for AO2, which is your concepts and your theory. You get 12 marks for AO3, which is your context. So you're not actually being given an AO1 mark. So AO1 mark is your language. However, within the mark scheme, it does talk about language patterns. So you do still need to identify things at language level, but you use that as a springboard to look at concepts and theory and context. Now, we did gender, power, and technology so far, and we've done little bits about language change. This basically incorporates anything you've learned before. It is designed, and I went to an exam board meeting, and it's designed to be kind of open-ended and free for you to basically analyse it in any way you see fit, which is good in some ways because obviously you can apply any knowledge you have. However, it does overwhelm some people. So basically, it's gender, power, technology, language change are your main things. But if you are in doubt and you're not sure about what to analyse, it's a media text. So talk about power, because power is always going to be relevant to a media text. Two of your most important elements to consider are representation and multimodality. Now, representation, remember, is how ideas, but I say just ideas, how ideas about the topic are presented, but also the writer themselves, the potential values of the reader, the values of the newspaper itself who's published it, anything about presentation of ideas and how we sort of get it across through the language. Multimodality is the mixed mode, the idea of obviously sort of text with image or text with image and video or anything like that. You have to engage in multimodality because it's there. The images that are chosen and the videos that are chosen are there to accompany text that is there to sort of support the ideas and the ideologies that are being presented. It says here, consider production and reception alongside genre, audience and purpose. This just comes off the back of some of the writing I've seen. Most of you talk about reception well and audience and purpose well. Production, though, is relevant to talk about quite often as well. Like, basically, production just means what are we learning about the views of the people who produce it. So it might be about the website itself, the newspaper itself, the person who writes it. And sometimes there are constraints to production that mean certain things happen in certain ways. It might be about sort of the amount of time you have to get something up. It might be about the fast-paced nature of news. It's harder to identify, but it will get you more marks if you can think more about the production of texts. So this is the lesson. So it says here, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent, and that's power. Because they control the minds of the masses. And that's from Malcolm X. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the above statement? Again, about 3 to 5 minutes to have a bit of a think about that. You've got 5 seconds on the video. Okay, so as you'd see from the previous quote, it's hard to separate media from power in some ways. So therefore, it's worth just engaging a little bit with power, and also the idea that we read the newspapers, we read news online, we listen to the radio. Therefore, what is put in newspapers is it does affect us. It does have a lot of power, and just not everyone shares the same ideologies. Though, like the world, what's happening in the world, the same thing is happening to everyone, but people view things in different ways, and people will report things in different ways. So we do need to, at least at a kind of a base level, explore a little bit about politics as well. So this is what we're going to try and do in the next couple of tasks. I've tried to make it as simple as possible. You've got left wing, right wing, and the centre. This is just taken from Wikipedia, but it sort of boils down what you need to know. Left wing parties are more socialist, so the idea being that they might tax more, but they offer more government services such as cheaper or free education and health. The idea here being that it also says later here, free education, unemployment benefits, and pension benefits. The idea here is a socialist-based as government generally looks at society and like how we can work together to create things. So it's a lot more to do with how we support, our fellow man in some ways. Right-wing parties tend to be more capitalist and corporate-based. The idea being here is that it's more about the individual than the society. And generally, businesses have more freedom. They can hire and fire people in an easier way. Labour laws are looser because it's trying to allow people to develop, make money and develop their businesses and things like that. So it does focus slightly more on the individual, perhaps. Now, newspapers have their own sort of political leanings, and that's what we need to look at. But these are broad brushstrokes. That it's not as simple as left-wing parties are always this and right-wing parties are always that. But it is a starting point for you to understand how they work. So in 2017, YouGov did a poll. Now, this is important to understand that this is not where the newspapers themselves see themselves. This was a variety of different people being asked to put down whether they thought the papers were very fairly, slightly left or right or central. As you can see, every single paper of the 8 that are on there have been positioned in some way, shape, or form in any of those categories. So it shows, firstly, I guess, that people don't always know exactly what the political leanings of the papers are. However, where you see kind of the data, it does start to group up in certain areas. So you can start to see where some of the papers are at least perceived to be. So I'm going to ask you to create a spectrum line of the newspapers from left wing to right wing. So using the data, just work out which papers do you think are left wing, which papers do you think are central, which papers do you think are right wing. And as it's a spectrum line, the whole idea being that, if they are further to the left, they are more left wing. If they are further to the right, they are more right wing. It is quite straightforward if you actually look at the data, but it would be nice for you to have a visual representation in your notes somewhere about where the perceived ideologies of these papers are. Challenge here says 39 to 49% replied don't know for each paper. What does that tell us? And this is the last task, really, because it will get you having a bit of a look at the front pages of each paper. Now, front pages of a paper aren't necessarily the only things about the ideologies, but it does give you a sense of what is important to the paper, what they're trying to promote to us, what their kind of initial thoughts are on a situation. So I've included the front pages of all the newspapers I could get today. It's from the BBC. They basically put them up every day, like almost like an overview of what the papers are covering. And it will allow you to look at what's the main story in the text, what does the text tell you about the producer's values, what does it suggest about the receiver's values, who, if anyone, is represented as at fault in the main story, and what else on the front page represents the viewpoint of the producer. Now, you don't actually have to look at the language levels here. This is solely looking at content, as in, the fact that it's included is what you're looking at. So I thought I'd go through the Sunday People one very quickly first, and then I'm going to ask you to complete the table for 3 other ones that have been included. Now, the main story here is quite straightforward. So the coronavirus crisis is happening, and the Sunday People look at the scandals in care homes. The idea that care homes aren't maybe getting as much support, or maybe not getting the PPE or the things that they need to save people. So that is your main story. What does this tell us about the producer values? So it's rare, but you'll see it. It's rare that there's not going to be some focus on the coronavirus at the moment because of the nature of it. But this is suggesting that the Sunday People in particular find the treatment of the older people really bad. Now, at a guess, and again, this is me guessing and sort of maybe broad brushstrokes, the Sunday People is the people who buy that are probably older than some of the other sort of audiences for the other papers. So the fact that they might skew towards something that might affect people of that age or people who have parents of that age is interesting, and it just shows that they're taking that specifically as an important thing because that might be something that their receivers in particular are engaged with. And what does it suggest? Actually, with the producer also, it suggests that they have a political kind of interest in what's going on. As in, rather than passively presenting the news to us, they are angry on our behalf. They are saying that this is it uses the word shame and it uses the word sacrifice. Now, you're not looking at the language, but you can't really avoid that in this instance. The receiver's values, the idea being that they would be interested perhaps in reading about the care home scandal, perhaps that they have an interest in people of that age and what's happening in the care industry, and or they are of that age, or they are approaching that age, or they know people of that age. And again, it kind of links a lot to the age of the person who's reading and who they know, and whether they know someone who might be in that kind of age bracket or that situation themselves. Who, if anyone, is represented at fault? This one's quite straightforward as well, actually. Shame on the government. So this is interesting. I mean, Sunday People does say it's proud to be independent. Whether they are strictly independent, I'm not 100% sure in terms of their political leanings, but they are sort of selling themselves as that. And with that in mind, they blame the government. Now, I don't believe they were on the last screen with regards to whether they were left wing or right wing, so we don't know whether that's going against their usual way of doing things, but they are very, very much putting this at the blame of the government, so therefore it's positioning them. If the government is Conservatives at the moment, you could argue that perhaps saying it's a left-wing thing is maybe a bit too much, but at least they are attacking them from a very central point of view, the idea being that, irrelevant of politics, this is a bad thing. And what else on the front page represents views? Now, this is an interesting one where you don't really see many other stories. What you get is a lot of other things to do with the pullouts inside. So you get various magazines, you get puzzles, you get a thing about VE Day, you get about staying trim and slimming world. And again, what I would suggest here is, because the stories themselves don't really sell anything to us, what you can start to suggest perhaps is with stuff like Slimming World and the VE Day stuff, is that it does imply that the audience skews slightly older, perhaps because they are someone who might be looking to lose a bit of weight in their middle age, or someone who would be kind of very tuned into the idea that it's VE Day and it's worth celebrating and so that. There'll be other papers that I've given you that will have more on their front pages that will be able to be, you can start to really analyse a little bit more about what's going on. Anyway, it says here, challenge, begin to make comparisons. The day was the same, but the content for every paper is different. This is important, I think, because actually in isolation, you might go, oh, okay, that's looking at this and that's looking at this. However, when you compare it to another paper, what you'll start to see is, firstly, there were a lot of news stories they could have covered. So you'll start to see what did they include, what didn't they include, and then start to maybe make a few more informed decisions about actually what does that tell us about each individual paper. Now that's it for that's it for lesson 1, basically. So as always, if you've got any problems, do email me or let me know. Hopefully these are being quite helpful for you. I'll be posting the second one pretty quickly, to be fair. These are designed to be up at the start of the week to support you in your analysis. As always, stay safe and be well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.